So I lost my uterus at 31, and in this video I'm going to be explaining why did I have to lose the uterus, and also what is life like without a uterus and cervix. Hi guys, my name is Sissy and I'm a mom of 3, and if you've been watching my pregnancy update videos, you will know that I had to have a cesarean hysterectomy. That is, they had to remove my uterus at the time of the cesarean section. So they removed the baby and removed the uterus as well, and also the cervix. So I explained during my pregnancy update videos, but I thought I would put everything in one place, so then if anyone asks me, I can just refer them to this video. First thing is that why did I lose the uterus? So I had 2 conditions in pregnancy called placenta previa and also placenta accreta spectrum. So placenta previa basically means that the placenta has implanted at the bottom of the cervix. So the placenta is what connects the baby to the mom, like they're supposed to be, there's a connection between us, so it's the placenta, and then this should be implanted anywhere else, anywhere like in the uterus, but anywhere above, because the cervix is the way for the baby to come out. So imagine if your placenta is here, and then let's say you go into labor and the cervix starts to open, so the placenta has a lot of blood and it's a connection for the baby, so there's a higher risk of bleeding, and that bleeding is more like risky, especially for the baby, because it's the baby's blood that might be lost first, and then it can be really bad for all of you, but especially for the baby. Usually in the case of placenta previa is that there's a high risk of blood loss. The next condition that I had was placenta accreta spectrum, which basically means that the placenta had implanted beyond the uterine wall. So if you imagine that the uterus is like this, it's like I don't know. Anyway, the uterus is like this, and it has 3 layers. You know, when you have a period, there's an inner lining of the uterus. So the inner lining of the uterus, when you have a period, is going to be shed off, and then the rest remain. There's other bits of the wall, which is fine. So when the placenta implants, the placenta should only implant in that area, in that inner lining of the uterus, which would have shed off anyways, like if you're having a period. So normally what happens is that the placenta implants, and then when you deliver the baby, the placenta also separates, and then you just have some bleeding and it's fine. So now in my case, the placenta had gone beyond the wall and it's deeply embedded. So for me, it was in my previous uterine scar. So because I'd had 2 C-sections before, it was in the scar and had gone like beyond. So that means that if, let's say, I'd had like a vaginal birth, if I didn't have the previa bit also, and it's just the only issue, if you have a vaginal birth, then the placenta refuses to separate, and so then you keep bleeding and bleeding. So that's another risk for bleeding. Why did I get these conditions? We don't know. We don't really know. But the biggest risk factor, or the main reason that people get the placenta accreta spectrum, is by having previous uterine surgery. So you know, when you have uterine surgery, they cut the uterus up to inside and then they sew it back, but it's really thin because they cut the lower segment, which is quite thin, and yet there are 3 layers. So imagine if they're sewing it up, it's very easy. I imagine it's easy for it to get all mixed up. So I think that's what happens. So the placenta easily passes through when it's growing and can easily go beyond that point. And then the previa bit is really, it just happens sometimes. So for me, I had both conditions, which are both high risk for bleeding. So at the time of my operation, the good thing is that they were able to figure out what was happening earlier on in pregnancy, because I had some bleeding, and so I had an MRI scan, I had lots of ultrasound scans, so they were able to see that what is happening in order to plan for this. If they didn't know what was happening, there was a chance that you would go in for a C-section thinking it's a C-section with no other complications, and then you start bleeding and bleeding and they just can't easily stop the bleeding, which is why it's really risky. Basically, that's why I had to remove the uterus, because you can't just pull out the placenta. And also for me, in my case, a big part of the placenta had spread beyond, and also a lot of it was a big area. So if it's just a small area of placenta that has grown into the uterus, then they can just cut off the entire uterine wall in which it has grown, and then they sew it back together. So for me, in my case, it was not possible. And also because it was at the bottom of the cervix, it had grown beyond that. Even when they opened, they couldn't even see the difference between the cervix, the uterus, the placenta. It was all just mashed up together. so that's why they had to just take it out, because otherwise the bleeding can be too much. And in my case, I did lose a lot of blood, so I lost 2.6 liters of blood, and also I ended up requiring 3 units of blood transfusion. Coming now to the feelings, when I first heard that I might have to lose my uterus, it sounded really scary, to be honest. I remember I cried. I was at work first of all, and then I got a call from my obstetrician giving me an update on my MRI scan, and it just sounds so extreme, eh? But then with time, and I think now that I've processed it, I think the thing that kept me going at that time, and even now that really motivates me, is that I really didn't have a choice. I didn't choose this. And also, when I consider that I could have lost my life, or even could have lost my baby, it's so much better to lose a uterus, because some people end up even having this. Some people lose their uterus for various reasons, and maybe they might have wanted children. So for me, really, I feel like it was like an exchange in life. It's like God said, give me your uterus and I'll give you a baby. That's how I take it. For me, I did have some sadness about it. Also, of course, because the decision has been made for me in terms of number of children. So I did used to want 4 kids. I even had 4 names picked out, but now I've had 3, which is really good enough. So there was some sadness that's about that, like grieving the loss of what could have been. But at the same time, I'm so grateful to be alive and to be happy with the children that I do have. And on the flip side as well, in terms of pros, I don't have to worry about contraceptives. I don't have to worry about periods anymore. Like, that's kind of an advantage of all this. Life without a uterus and a cervix is really pretty much normal. Like, it's the same as it was before. The main thing I was worried about, really, to be honest, was the sex, because I was like, oh my God, what's it going to be like without cervix? So what happens is that when they remove your uterus plus the cervix, sometimes they can remove the uterus only and leave the cervix. So for me, they had to remove all. So what happens is that they're going to stitch it up together at the back and then leave what is called a vaginal cuff. So I watched a lot of videos about this, like people's experiences of who had hysterectomies and what was sex like after, and some people were saying that there's like some pain or some soreness, but for me, honestly, it's been completely the same. I can't even tell the difference. My husband also says that there's no difference at all. And then also, because I had my ovaries, like my ovaries were not removed because they had no problem, thank God. I still have my hormones, so it's not like I'm going into menopause. A lot of people ask me that, like, are you going to go in menopause now? I'm not. Although my obstetrician did tell me that the uterus also contributes to the hormonal system, so there is a chance that I might go into the menopause earlier than I would have if I had my uterus. But I'm not too really worried about that, because I'm just happy that I even have hormones at the moment. I think really that's it from me, guys. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions for me, then please do let me know in the comments below, and see you in my next video. Bye.